Welcome to Plan Conversations, everyone. Thank you for being here today. We're very excited to have Jill Birschbach and Derek Reeverts joining us for our conversation about their many year-long participation in Small Favors, which is our exhibition that's up right now. Small Favors, this is the I think 19th year. So we're going to celebrate 20 years of Small Favors next year. So think of something special to do. I'm going to start by introducing myself, which I sometimes forget to do. I'm Jennifer Zwilling. I'm the curator and director of artistic programs here at the Clay Studio. We recognize that the Clay Studio stands on the indigenous territory known as Lenape-Hawking, the traditional homelands of the Lenni Lenape people, and we reflect on the role of the Lenape as the past and present stewards of the land and commit to joining in their tradition of respect and caring for the land and each other now and in the future. I have to remind everyone that we are very excited to be able to offer these programs for free. So if you feel so inspired to go over to our website and make a donation to the exhibition fund, that helps us continue to do this free programming. And it means a lot to me that you've taken the time today to listen to these two amazing artists talk and to join in our Clay Studio community. So thanks for being here. I am going to introduce our guests. Jill Birschbach studied photography and has a BFA from the University of Wisconsin, Oshkosh, and MFA from the University of Nebraska. She moved to Chicago in 1996 and worked in the photography industry while teaching part-time at Columbia College. With the onset of digital photography, she missed the feeling of creating things with her hands and working in the dark room. She started taking ceramics classes and was a studio assistant at the Evanston Art Center for 10 years before she joined the Midwest Clay Guild, her current studio. Jill lives in Evanston, Illinois with her husband and two cats, Mochi and Freet. Yep. She is Frite or Freet?
Freet, like the French fries.
She's a senior research editor for Getty Images in Chicago. Thank you for being here, Jill.
You're welcome.
Derek Reeverts grew up in rural Illinois, surrounded by faith and farming. He received his MFA in ceramics from Miami University of Ohio in 2009 and his BFA in ceramics from Western Illinois University in 1999. He's been the ceramics area teaching lab specialist and instructor for the University of Florida since 2013 and serves as the co-director of special projects for the NCCA Green Task Force. He has 25 plus years experience in pedagogy in both functional and sculptural ceramics, helping instruct both graduate and undergraduate students in the use of equipment, new technology, materials, process, toxicology, and kiln building. His work continues to be exhibited both nationally and internationally in such places as the Clay Studio in Philadelphia, Wuhan Textile University, and the Richard and Carol Cox Art Museum. He focuses on the inherent foibles of human nature and how expression and predicament interplays with idiomatic. He's also a father, husband, and an avid horror fan. I feel like I could have guessed that from your work. Honestly. Great. So I'm going to start with our standard question, and then we'll move to sort of focus on how you've approached your small favors over the past several years. So Jill, do you want to start by answering how and why did you make the brave decision to make your life in art?
Sure. It was kind of a circuitous. I'm sure I said that wrong. I did not come from a very arty family. My family was very working class, and it wasn't something that was, we didn't really talk about art, but my parents were both makers. Like my mom sewed clothes for me. She knitted. She had a pretty nice garden, all those things. And my dad repaired appliances for people. He worked for Wisconsin Power and Light for his entire career. So he had a workshop in the basement with all his tools and everything on pegboard. And so making was important. And as I like to say, my dad's highest compliment was if someone was mechanically inclined. So I was always interested in wanting to make things. And then when I actually switched to public school in junior high where they had art classes, I took all the art classes in junior high and high school, and it was basically my favorite thing of favorite class. So I made the maybe disappointing decision to my parents to study art in undergrad. And I told them I was going to do graphic design just to make them feel like it was a career, which I did take graphic design, but I ended up taking a lot of studio classes and just loved it. Um, I took everything, figure drawing, painting, a lot of photography, of course. Um, and with the encouragement of a couple professors in undergrad, they really encouraged me to go to grad school, which I don't think I would have thought of on my own.
Mm.
I wouldn't have thought it was possible, really, just coming from where I did. Um, so with their encouragement, I applied, and basically I credit grad school with where I am now, because you just get all the time. Well, of course, Lincoln, Nebraska, you're a little removed from places. There's not a lot to do around there. So it's like all you do is spend time in your studio making things. All your friends are making things, and it's just your whole life revolves around that. So I really learned like a studio practice from that. And once I left there, it's like I couldn't stop doing that. Like I had to keep doing that. So
Mm.
that's kind of where I ended up.
Yeah. Yeah. A lot of people say that, like, you don't feel like you have a choice. You just have to do it. But
Yeah.
of course, it's always, it's a choice. We wake up every day and we decide that we'd rather be happy or do what fulfills us than maybe pursue something more traditional. So that's great. Thank you for sharing that. I have to say, I've started taking notes for how many people start with their mom when they answer that question, and a lot of people start with their mom.
Yeah.
I think it's really cool. Um, Now we will switch to ask Derek the same question and note that dads are also very important and often referenced to this.
And
Being
weird
a
and
dad.
weirdly, yeah, weirdly, mine actually played a lot into it. So for me, that choice was, I don't know, the path was kind of meandering in a lot of ways. Like it wasn't something, I mean, I was, in high school, I was good at art, but it's easy to be kind of the best at that when you graduate from a public high school of 29 people in my graduating class. Um, and
29.
so, yeah, so I mean, my father was also my English teacher, and so I wanted to go into education. Is how that started. So, but I kind of was undeclared a lot when I got into undergraduate, and for a while, and finally, was hanging out with one of the art students, and they saw a piece of mine that was in my house when we were over there, and they said, "How could you not be an art major?" So, anyway, so I declared art education. Actually, is where I went first. It was education, art education, and then I went over to studio. Um, but I was studio drawing, and then went from drawing to ceramics. And then after I graduated, I did a lot of different things, but for instance, I worked in a tattoo shop for a while, and then after that, I worked at a ad marketing place, one of the largest in Illinois, that's outside of Chicago. It was at the time, and and then I decided, it was time to go back to grad school. So through that whole time, one thing that I didn't do was stop making. Right, I there was a lot of sacrifices that were made in order to keep studio space in a very rural area.
Mm.
And as we all know, for ceramics, that's not the easiest thing to do, to be able to maintain access to kilns and have workspace, get clay. Sometimes I was digging it out of the ground. I did a residency in a small art center that's close to where I'm from. That was an old brick foundry, so I was, digging clay and making things. And I really kind of paid attention to what was it that was my priority in life. It wasn't work in my job. It was the fact that I looked forward to leaving my job and going home and making every day.
Mm.
And so I, prioritized getting into grad school, and that's when I went to Ohio, Miami of Ohio, and it was kind of the same setup that Jill was talking about. It's kind of rural, and when you're there, you just make and that's there wasn't a whole lot. I mean, part of the reason I picked that school was because it was in a kind of a small town area, which I was comfortable with, but also knowing that it would sort of like, help me focus. And I honestly, I went there to kind of teach art, but then that experience sort of opened me up, and part of that was the clay studio when I sold a piece to Sandy Besser, that in that Marge Callender Brown show, first one that I was in, kind of opened me to the possibility of, like there's also studio, there's different, so it kind of opened the view of what having a life in art meant. And it's not, it doesn't have to be just education. It doesn't have to be just this thing or that thing. So
Yeah, I like that, what having a life in art means, because it really is not a straight path, and it's hardly ever just one thing, as you're saying. And I think that's a really important lesson that a lot of art students don't really get when they're actually definitely in undergrad. It's like this idea, there's still, like, in my experience, a lot of teachers who are pushing the idea that if you aren't just like in your studio making art, selling to galleries or something, that you're not successful or that you've sold out. And that it's so important to understand that even in other fields, people have lots of jobs, lots of different ways of kind of making a living. And that can be really beneficial, especially to an art practice. I think, those life experiences and different ways of making money can inspire you or remind you that you want to get back into the studio, or give you ideas for what you want to make. So it's great. Thank you both. Okay, so I'd like to ask the question about how you approached small favors. And first, I think we'll just talk about it for a moment before we actually look at images. So we'll switch to that. But Derek, can you start out by just explaining how you kind of and you mentioned this when we were off the public call earlier, about like your first foray into small favors and then how it's evolved over the years.
sure. I was invited to be part of it, and I don't recall the year. I mean, I think I've been doing this for a long time. I can't remember
It must have been before 2014, because the first one I found was 2014, and it wasn't the one you were talking about. So.
Right. Yeah. No, it's been at least 12 or 13, 14, 15 years, somewhere in there. But anyway, so yeah, I think it was because of that, the being in the Marge Callender Brown graduate show, that I started to build a connection with the clay studio. And the person who was in your position at the time then invited me to send a piece over. And the first piece that I had in there, I got the cube, and trying to figure out exactly, how I could, because I work small-ish to begin with. So trying to figure out how to fit this thing into that box, and I ended up just like cutting a figure off at the waist and making it look like they were bursting out of the back of the cube, where it was like they were mining their way out of the wall. I think it had a flashlight and a rock hammer.
Oh, yeah.
And I think if I remember right, the piece was called Breakthrough. And I don't know. And so after that, then I started I thought it was fun to kind of do the figure, but I started making them so that they would actually like utilize the box more as a diorama. So the size was a little closer to what the box can handle.
Yeah. And then there's always some kind of, I don't know if I should say moral, but some kind of, often anyway, there's a message within what the person is doing.
Yeah. So, I mean, and that's, that's one of the things in my own work, with my father being an English teacher his whole career, my work plays with the intersection of language and form, right? So everything I use is to title pieces are always idioms or adages, But they're also sort of placeholders to use that language and the figure that has an object, an action, and an expression to sort of portray what all of those things, just hold them all together.
An object, an action, and what was the last thing?
An expression.
Yeah. Okay. All right. So I'll share my screen so people can see what we're talking about. Oops. So this is this year's small favor. So maybe you can talk through this one a little bit and then we can go back in time.
So this one, because it isn't set up like it's supposed to be, because it's on
It's not?
oh no, because it's on the one on the right hand side is on flat space, so the figure's kind of kicked up a little bit.
Oh yeah, that's right.
The figure is supposed to be facing more towards where the cracks in the glass are. But yeah,
That would make more sense probably.
So, but this one was about glass houses, and you know, for doing small favors, I try to make, I mean, I try to use the language to almost make like little quibs or little jokes. And I think that works really well with this tiny sort of like vignette image. So, you know, you have a figure with a pile of rocks, and he's, you know, throwing the rocks, and that is evident because of the scattered rocks and the damaged glass that's over to the side. But of course, you know, this is his world, and by throwing these rocks, then he's triggering this reaction where the split goes all the way up to where the golden anvil is set to fall where he's sitting in the box. So, you know, it's about process and repercussion and maybe foresight, I guess, or lack thereof.
Yeah. It's great. And of course we unwrapped it and I was like, oh no, the box is broken.
Oh, did you?
No, it's supposed to be like that. Okay.
Yeah. And in my work, I try to I use self-portraiture sort of in the vein of how Robert Arneson would use self-portraiture, and that it's me, but it's not me, right? So like Arneson talked about being attached and equally attached and disattached to the idea of self. And so often what happens in all of my pieces, even though I'm using self-portraiture, it's to talk about, it uses it as a placeholder, right? So it's talking about other things that aren't actually me.
Yeah. Thank you for wearing a black t-shirt today. You can match.
Yeah, I didn't wear the t-shirt that was based off of though.
Right. Now I'm afraid that all of these figures are like in here incorrectly, but you'll just let us know. So they're not really in chronological order necessarily. I think these are the older ones. And then I'm just gonna look through them this way and then we can decide what to start talking about. Yeah, I think maybe, do you want to explain what's happening in this one?
Yeah, so he's supposed to be twisted a little bit, so he's looking at the audience and he has his heel kicked up on the edge of the box there, and the other one would be hanging down. So this one was titled Going South, and this is kind of a commentary about well, I mean, it's sort of a heavy-handed commentary about environmental degradation at the end of the day. And you know, a lot of what's happening in the state of Florida. And you know, so also at the time that I did this, there was a lot of wildfires going on, and you know, kind of all over the place. But he, you know, he still has the Molotov cocktail where it's, you know, the potential of destruction is in his hand, and it's hard to see on there, but a lot of times what I do is I use the belt buckle as a little additional vignette to sort of like add as an exclamation point. But you know, he's got the rusted oil barrel behind him, and the kind of burnt forest wildfires going on.
Hmm. Okay, next year I'm gonna call you and FaceTime you when I'm putting it in. So here's a little three of the past ones. I'm assuming that the one with the nail is correct because he's actually
Yep.
nailing it into the
Yeah,
side.
actually, all of these are correct.
Great, I love it. Yeah, go ahead.
Do you want me to talk about like I'll just, I don't want to take too much time, but the one in the center is that one's called Left Holding the Bag, and there's actually a little tiny like wooden bucket with coal in it that's sitting to a side, and this is very much again it's about you know, climate change and sort of the history of where I come from. So the town I'm actually from is a little town of 1,700 people in the middle of cornfields in Illinois called Colchester. It used to be Colchester because there's a lot of coal mining in the town. And so this is kind of a nod to, you know, the history of where I come from, but also how that affected the way that things are today with coal and what it's done.
Great, thank you. And then I think we can see there's this one. This is, I don't know if this was last year or the year before that, but I'm gonna talk about this one a little bit.
Yeah, that one that was called State of Panic. And so this is you know, this person is set up in this heavy what obviously is militarized sort of bunker area with this high tech you know, viewing machine on the top, but also there's like a little gun on it too, and he you know, is wearing the American flag, which obviously kind of places him as a placeholder as my thoughts of the country and not just an individual. So the idea of, you know, having this country that's housed in one of the in not even arguably the most defended, most highly skilled and dangerous military in the world, yet he's got this pearl clutching gasp. You know, we're so often worried about our national safety, and you know, it's this big talking and rallying point in politics, yet he's totally surrounded and safe and enclosed.
Yeah. Great, thank you. And then finally, there's, you know, we always think, okay, what's Derek sending? We're expecting one of these little figures. And then the last few years, you've also been sort of experimenting with another way of making them. So what inspired this one? These
little tiles. When I grew up, the Delft design was everywhere in my grandmother's house, and it's one that I've carried with me pretty much my entire career in ceramics. So I like playing with the idea of Delft. Now, the one on the right is the skull. The skull piece is traditional ceramic surfacing, but the one on the left is actually entirely acrylic surfacing. So that's another thing I like to do in my work, is sort of play with surfacing mediums and trump away certain things back and forth. Sometimes it's ceramic that looks not ceramic and vice versa. And it's just kind of fun. So it's kind of fun to play with that.
Thank you. Okay, we're gonna ask Jill to talk about hers, and then we'll come back to your non-small favors work.
Okay.
These are this year's.
Yeah, so I actually became aware of the clay studio from when Ensika was in Philly. That was a little bit ago. But
2010.
yeah, and I loved the space. I loved the people you had as residents. I just really liked the vibe. So it was, you were on my radar after that. And then when I saw the calls for small favors, I was like, well, I want to apply to this because I just really love the clay studio. So I approached it basically trying to make smaller versions of my usual sculptures, which I'm a hand builder, and I typically work with slabs, which is a little trickier at the smaller scale. Because yeah, like to work with slabs, I make them my usual size, like they're kind of clunky when you try to shrink them down that small. So I was like, well, how do I make this read? And I started trying to pinch the edges, but trying to like make it more readable, like a more abstract sculpture at the size of 4-inch cube, um, was pretty tricky with slabs. So I decided like after um, trying a bunch of things, it's like, well, it's smaller, minimal, more simple is better. Because I also like working with very textural glazes. Yeah. And I've done quite a few different variations for this show. But yeah, like these house forms, they're very simple, but and they simple, but also would work well with a textural glaze on them and still be readable at that size. Um,
Hmm.
but yeah,
These were earlier,
yeah,
maybe? Yeah.
yeah, these are earlier. A lot of my sculptural work kind of comes from trying to make things look more mechanical, industrial. I usually stamp holes in my clay before I even build anything.
Mhm.
But of course, it varies. Yeah, you can
Yeah,
see I'm
right.
all over the place. But the house form is kind of a constant with a lot of my pieces. Um, and again, just, kind of dealing with where I came from, like a working class background, um, and kind of showing like things may be pretty and nice on the outside, but maybe on the inside they're not quite as nice.
Mm.
Um, that's what these are, I think, from last year.
Hmm.
But yeah, so it's a little overtly, but yeah, a little bit gruesome, I guess. Um,
Oh, yeah, from that perspective, but they're also beautiful. So I guess that maybe were these the earlier ones that are very much more related to your photography practice?
Yeah, at a certain point, I was trying to bring together my photography and ceramics, and I hit upon like ceramic decals as being something that seemed achievable with the facilities I had. And these are all, I made all my own ceramic decals with my photography. So these are my own photographs that I shot of the house that I grew up in and also my grandparents' house.
Mm.
And uh and again with my photos too, they're usually pretty simple. They're sort of small, quiet moments, which really lend themselves, I think, to the smaller size. They're little intimate, um, little scenes. But yeah, like the photo on the right, they're my mom and my aunt's high school portraits in my grandmother's house.
Mm.
Um, but I like the combination of the clay is sort of rough. I have there's like ridges in the clay, so it's like like a contrast between this quiet, like nice sort of middle class, but then it's also a little crude in the clay part.
Mm.
So it's kind of an interesting contrast.
And then is this sort of the jumping off point to then decide to like focus on the house forms but remove the photography? Is that like how that progression happened?
Yeah, I just a lot of the photos I was using were ones that I had shot in the 90s. Um, and those had like a certain meaning for me, especially because those places don't exist anymore. And making a decal was a way to sort of freeze it in time. Um, but these are a little more subtle, I guess, kind of again with like the sort of not necessarily gruesome, but like it's a little crude and rough on the
Visceral.
outside. Yeah. And again with the keyhole, the house I grew up in had all the old doors and keyholes. Like these were the kind of um locks that were on all the doors with and the skeleton key.
Hmm.
And again, you could kind of see, you can't really see what's inside, but it invites you to think about what's going on inside.
Yeah, absolutely. Um, I I love the idea that again, from the perspective of the people who are sort of unwrapping them and thinking about them as they come in each year, is that I know it's going to be, or I have a feeling that it's going to be a house form, or I don't need to look at your label. Like I pull it out and I'm like, oh, this is Jill's. And it doesn't matter if it has these sort of different glaze treatments and even the decals and not, because I recognize the house form. And I think it's really special that you can have something that's recognizable and yet continues to change so much. Yeah. And then this year we have something new. Oh, word.
Yeah. I had done sort of a series of these a while ago. I didn't really show them to many people. But I decided to this year. But yeah, with the word, kind of sort of negative self-talk that I absorbed, I guess, growing up. And it's sort of the things that are telling myself, you're lazy, you're helpless, it's all those kind of things. And I just thought, well, I'll make them real. I'll take them out of my head and make it real, make it sort of gross. And then also it sort of makes it think like, well, this isn't really true. But it's sort of this, I don't know, it's sort of trying to purge, I guess. And I just made tons of these because I just pictured a wall full of helpless and lazy. Um,
Yeah.
so
And
this was like, yeah,
you make it real, it's easier to realize that it's not real. Right.
yeah, exactly. And again, the house form there, simplified, but I recently started working with gloop glazes,
Mm-hmm.
and I love how they are beautiful, but also a little gruesome. Um, but I find that really appealing. Just, I don't know, like this perfect middle class house, but it's actually kind of a little disturbing.
Yeah, and there's a little horror in both of your works, I guess,
Yeah.
as there is in our everyday lives. Thank you. So let's look back at Derek, at your other work, and talk a little bit about it, and then with the eye of thinking about, what is it that, if at all, did Small Favors kind of help you think about, or did it change your perspective in a way that um, then like in turn affected your main body of work? Maybe.
Okay, so this piece is called Tarred and Feathered, and I think this is one of my pieces that's very successful with the narrative quality of what I do. So he obviously has the flying machine that's on, and the elements that you see is like his belt buckle is the white star on the green background with the lines that it was common on um, military prop planes and for like in World War II. And he has brush, but it has black tar on it that's dripped down onto the rock, and his foot is stuck on there. So this piece was done. It was after I had gotten out of grad school, but was still adjuncting, and this piece is very much about the the readiness for change, the readiness to move forward, but having a lot of elements that sort of like keep you rooted to the spot sometimes. And a lot of times those things are because of your own actions, your own choices. So he has the brush with the tar, and the tar is what's, he's stepped in himself and is keeping him rooted to the spot. So in using the idea of tarred and feathered, I'm it's everybody knows what that means, but I'm trying to sort of create this contradiction between those two items, where, you know, the idea of feathers allows you to fly, and the idea of tar is very much something that, you know, whether it's the LeBray pits or something that gets stuck to houses, it's something that kind of keeps you in place.
Yeah.
This one is called Phantom Limb. And what's funny is that this was, it's about studio practice. It's a good way of putting this, and the difficulty of adulting and doing studio practice. So this was done post having my son, my first child, and the idea of, you know, having this, so that the arm sort of represents the studio practice, and he has this hammer in which, you know, the fingers are broken. And, you know, obviously, like, he's taken, or presumably he's taken the action as part of this breaking of that thing. But also he, you know, is gazing at it and looking at it, whether that's you know, out of longing or whatever, I think is up to the viewer to decide. There's also on the shirt, when the shirt is open, I use the shirt as, because I used to help teach graphics in a K through like in a vocational program, K through 12. And so we printed t-shirts, and so doing t-shirts is something that I've always really loved doing, and doing that graphic and doing, you know, I worked in ad marketing, so we were doing logos, and I like to sort of like take an idea and sort of make it essential in one like little logo quib or like little image. And so a lot of times you'll see these things pop up on the t-shirts of the figure. And I use the crown. A lot of times there's keys. I use the image of skulls a lot, and a lot of that revolves around. So my father was an English teacher, as I said, but he was also a minister for 46 years. He did both of those things. And so, you know, I grew up in a household with this sense of a pretty heavy structure and authority, and you know, that the crown can be king, but it also kind of refers to a lot of religious things. The keys, you know, refer to a lot of things in education, but also religious things. So there's a lot of crossover for me. And again, you see the Delftware on the arm, but this time it sort of, as you can see, it kind of traces up underneath onto his skin. You know, there's also that subcultural working in a tattoo shop, and the kind of crowd that I tend to run with. This is one of the first pieces, by the way, that has the gray on the sides.
I was gonna say
You can see
something about that.
the transition in age. Doesn't quite have the beard. It took me a while to bring that in, to identify with the beard, but and then, you know, is on the piece with the skull underneath. It's that underlying sense of, and I think, you know, ever since about 2016, and probably before that, with climate change, it's something I pay a lot of attention to, but a lot with the political climate and the shift, there's just kind of this overriding sense of doom. And I think that, you know, having this centerpiece, like you can see that the piece that I've got here also incorporates, you know, the skull into that, and it's just kind of this ever-present sense of like underlying doom, and that's what that represents.
Yeah, there is definitely an underlying sense of doom.
Yeah.
That's okay. That's why we're in the arts, because it helps.
Yeah, and you know, and it helps me sort of like exercise these things, right? Like, instead of sitting on them, it's sort of like Jill was talking about with the word helpless. So this one was actually done before January 6th. But this piece is called Cover Up. And I will admit, I went down a really dark rabbit hole of white supremacist symbology on this one. And there's a lot of that symbology that I put on as a narrative of tattoos on the figure, and the knuckles up front, you know, I used, because I worked in a tattoo shop for a bit, I used that a lot to sort of illustrate ideas. And so the idea of this is that you can have, you know, it doesn't matter what you say or what you do, as long as you wrap an American flag around it, it's patriotism, right? Like that's, so on the knuckles, it says, fuck them. But I'm sorry, I don't know if I was supposed to say that or not.
Okay, it's not
but-
PBS, you're fine.
Okay, but that represents, you know, when there were family separations and the camps for immigrants, and so that's a reference there. And then there's the 3%ers up on the neck and a variety of other things. And then there's the belt buckle is this imperial eagle, right? This like Aquila, which is always sort of identified with imperialism in that sense of militarism. So anyway, this fit really well in with all of those things, but was done well before those things happened, which is kind of frightening, I guess. But
yeah, but it really didn't surprise most of us, I think. And then this is your last one, and I'll just pause to say the fact, I mean, this is an obvious thing to say, but the fact that your father was an English teacher and each one of your sculptures it's like a whole story, your storytelling, and each little detail is part of the story, and it's very it's interesting to think about that, the parallel there. Anyway, go ahead.
thank you. The other thing that I'll throw in is I'm also a gamer, but not like a computer gamer. I'm old, like Dungeons and Dragons and role-playing gamer from way back, you know, when it kind of first came out. I was very young. And those are all stories, right? Like you're just telling a story when you're doing these games. And the skill sets for doing the miniatures, that's actually what gives me the skill set to be able to surface these pieces. So this one is called High Horse, and this I did this after this was a self-reprimand for arguing on Facebook. This I one time when I wasted I don't know how many hours of studio time just sitting there arguing on Facebook, and I stopped and I was like, what am I doing? And that phenomenon, like people started talking about that. So, you know, so you've got this figure, and I should have sent a close-up picture too. So on the front, on his t-shirt is this white king chess piece painted, and then his belt buckle is just the Facebook symbol. So you've got this guy who's obviously like playing this game, you know, with the idea of this chess piece and thinking that he's king in this game. But as we all know, the king actually has the worst maneuverability in the game. And being the, you know, most important piece at the same time is this weird juxtaposition. But also being the knight, right? So he has this horse, but it's not a real horse, it's this hobby horse. And something that's definitely identified with children and childishness. And but at the same time, he's on this horse and he's holding his hand down to help you up, right? Meaning that he is on his high horse. And he's giving you the option of coming up to his level. So it's very tongue-in-cheek and definitely a kind of a self-own for that.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's you deserve praise for like realizing that it was not a good use of your time, because there's a lot of people out there who don't ever realize that, which is a problem. Thank you. Okay, so Jill, if you want to talk through yours, and then we'll open it up for questions from the audience.
Yeah. So a lot of my sculptural work, as I said, is slab and hand built. A lot of it comes from memories again of my working class family. We visited we did a lot of factory tours on vacations. We visited like dams and power plants. I mean, my dad worked for the electric company, so we always we would visit like substations and just crazy kinds of places for probably normal people. I'm not sure if people do that, but and I also worked in a factory for a couple summers in college. Um, and so I've always been kind of fascinated with like the forms of machinery and like, what does this do? I didn't really know what those things do, but um, so these are kind of like in my mind, they're sort of like mechanical objects, like it could be part of a machine. Um, this is more recent where I started showing scaffolding sort of like because my original forms were more closed and you wouldn't see any structure on the inside. And then I started thinking about peeling it away so you could see what was inside. So that's kind of what like the scaffoldy part is um, on these. And again, it's sort of got like, yeah, sort of bodily fluid sort of references, like with the bloody and kind of foamy.
Mm,
I just like that combination of like the body, but also industrial kinds of ideas.
mm, absolutely.
Yeah, and again, this was you can see there's the holes that I stamp in my sculptures. It's something I think it just my eyes really like that repetitive and that mechanical look of the holes in like grids. It also reminds me of pegboard, um, which makes me think of my dad's workshop. Like we always had, he has tools all spread out on a pegboard.
Mm,
Um, and in grad school, I was actually doing some work with photo emulsion painted on pegboard.
mm,
Um, yeah, so and that in my mind, like the holes are sort of like a shorthand for sort of like working class, sort of mechanical, industrial. Um,
mm,
so it's got that pointy, but then also again, it's sort of like we've got the red
yes.
again, which and it's sort of like this combination of sharp and then squishy.
Mm. Yeah, it's like you're laying bare the insides. You're showing the sort of external m- machine-made parts and stuff, but then you're always referencing like all the mushiness and the blood and viscera.
Yeah, and this was the first one I did, which exposing the scaffolding, like because normally like a lot of these forms were more like not well, kind of like a tombstone shape. They'd be sort of curved on top and then um just closed forms. And so this one was again revealing what might be the structure on the inside. It's not necessarily perfect. It's kind of rickety, maybe a little unstable, but it's still standing. But yeah, and then like with that foamy crater glaze on the inside, it's sort of like the maybe pretty on the outside and not so nice on the inside.
Mm,
Or yeah. Yeah, these were some of my most recent pieces. These are for the wall. And again, these are closed, of course, but a lot of the glazes I use on this again are referencing sort of fluids, and I kind of throw the kitchen sink at it. I like to see what happens when you layer um a shiny runny glaze and then a lichen glaze and then a crater glaze and then and
mm.
just kind of see what happens. And I have a general idea of what it might do, but a lot of times I'm surprised. And I really like that element. Um, I think it maybe I just like the process. Like in photography, there's all the steps. You know, you develop your film and then you're in the dark room and you're printing. And
Mm,
with ceramics, it's kind of the same for me. Like there's all the steps. And then um I set it up where I'm hoping something interesting happens in the kiln, and then I'm always surprised when I open the kiln. Um, and I was actually, I don't know if anyone else has noticed this, but I know so many people who were in photography that now do ceramics. It's kind of odd.
oh yeah. I guess I know a couple people. I think everybody's doing ceramics now. That's
Yeah, yeah.
there's
Uh,
yeah, this one's particularly drippy. And
Yeah.
the bodily fluids that you're referencing are they're definitely
Yeah.
obvious.
Yeah, and that one's actually a lamp.
It's a lamp.
Yeah, I didn't have a picture of it, but I started kind of lighting some of these sculptures, and it's been really interesting to see what happens. It adds another dimension to it, but
So is the light coming out of the holes?
yeah.
Oh, that's so great. Okay, I love it. That's I was thinking about a clock exhibition, but I think maybe we need a lamp exhibition too.
Yeah. I don't know, I'm just really fascinated with that. It's like it adds this extra dimension. Like even, it's like another layer, like, well, what's it gonna do when there's light coming out of it?
Yeah,
And
that's
some of the last pieces I did, I started glazing the slab before I built it with it. 'Cause I
oh,
was like, what if the whole thing is orange inside? Because I was trying to figure out like how do I get color all on the inside? Because a lot of them are closed forms, so then it's like you can't really get in there later. So so far it's working. um, but this one's just a wall piece. This is not a lamp, but again working. This is a newer glaze combo for me. It's um extra gloopy, puffy chunks. And again, layered, there's slip and multiple layers of glazes, some lichen glazes and crater glazes. Um, and again, sort of looks kind of referencing bodily fluids. It's got the opening. Um,
Hmm.
but yeah.
Um, I I love. I mean, this is one of the reasons I love small favors is that there's such different work. I mean, it's why I love clay in general, I guess, as an art medium, because you can be a ceramic artist and be, you know, making figures that have narratives, and then you can make sculptures that play with glaze and hang on the wall. Like it's so exciting that the same material is meaningful to all these artists who approach it in such different ways. So I guess I still have the question about kind of how small favors affected you both, but I want to ask if the audience has questions before I keep talking. So we don't have a lot of time left. Anyone have a question they want to ask? No? Okay. Well, then we'll do what was it? How has small favors, your sort of continuous participation in small favors maybe affected your way of approaching your other work? Do you want to go first, Derek?
Sure. I think the hardest part for doing small favors for me is being able to formulate the figure and doing things and sort of like compress the idea of diorama. So what Small Favors has done in my other work is make my inclusion of some symbology, objects, and diorama more efficient, I would say, if that makes sense.
Mhm.
That's probably the most outstanding thing that it's done.
Um, I like that word efficient. And I guess I was sort of thinking that because the fact that you have the structure of the cube allows you to add things that you would have to think of a different way to add if you were just like when you're just working with the figure. So like you could put the anvil over his head.
Yeah, yeah.
So
And like a lot of times when in writing they talk, like distill what you're trying to say. And it's sort of the object version of that.
mm-hmm. Yeah, simplifying. Love it. What do you think, Jill?
I would say it's sort of taught me a little more refinement because in general, when I build with slabs, I'm working really fast. Like I could make a sculpture in a few hours once the clay gets to the right level of dryness. But yeah, it's like when it's small, you really have to make some of the details finer in order, because otherwise at that scale, it just is so clunky. And I think since then I've paid attention to some of the more some more details that I wasn't before. like what's on the bottom of my sculpture, or like adding little details, or maybe like finessing the edges a little more so it's like a contrast with clunky and then fine.
Hmm.
But it's definitely, I enjoy working small like that. It's like an interesting challenge.
That's good. And the other thing that similarity between both of you is that you're making your works often so that they hang over the edge. Well, not as often with Jill, but it has happened that like the glaze strips are coming down, so we have to sort of put it on the front of the cube so you can see that. And of course, Derek's
Yeah.
got little guy's legs are falling off, and that actually doesn't happen as often as you would think if you walk around Small Favors. They're not everybody thinks about the cube and its space and coming out of the space as much as you two do. So I really appreciate that. And also, you both always make things that actually fit inside the box, which not everybody does.
It's because I make y'all go to the trouble of sending me the box first.
Well, whatever it takes, I always know it's gonna work. So that's nice.
You know, Small Favors for many years has always been sort of the highlight of my year. I really love the show.
Well, that makes all of us here very happy. We are gonna continue to enjoy getting your little treasures every year and putting them in the gallery. Do either of you have anything else you want to share before we sign off? Great. It's been lovely talking to you. I hope you have a great day. This has been recorded, so it'll be up on our website and on our YouTube channel. And tune back in 2 weeks, and we'll have two other long-term Small Favors artists, Claire McCauley and Sharon Bartman. Claire does little figures and Sharon does house forms. So it'll be a little bit of a parallel. So have a great day, everybody. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks,
Thank
everyone.
you.
Bye.
Bye.